Alright folks, I'm going to do a pretty lengthy video here with my thoughts on the Virginia shooting which happened earlier this week. Pretty much everybody's seen it. You know, if you're on YouTube, if you have an internet connection, it's probably assailed you at some point. But to recap, there was this guy up in Virginia who was very aggrieved and wanted a lot of public recognition. So he went on live TV and killed two of his former co-workers. And on top of it, he held up his smartphone the entire time, put up on Twitter and Facebook. I don't know. There's plenty of reasons I've heard for why he went out and did it, as if there's actually a logical explanation for why anyone would go out and kill two people. But, yeah, the thing that really struck me about this, you know, I actually am a person who, you know, supports the economy. I have a job, and I pay taxes. And I have, you know, an actual job that I go to during the day, and I provide services in exchange for money. And because of that, you know, I didn't actually get to see this video or really hear about the event until way, way later in the evening when I got home. So I go on the Facebook and I hear about this incident, and then I decide to go on to the YouTube to kind of get more information about it. And the thing that strikes me is, and this really kind of tells you about the importance of the internet in disseminating information and things that are not completely what I would consider information in any regard. When 9/11 happened, it wasn't until like 2006 that I even heard this idea that there are people out there who believe 9/11 was an inside job. So it took 5 years after the event actually happened for me to actually know that there was a group of people out there who believed that there was some false flag operation going on. Okay, when Sandy Hook happened, you know, I didn't actually know there was a big contingency of people out there who believed that was also a false flag until, you know, a month later. So already you're kind of seeing, you know, how the internet expedites the disinformation cycle. So yeah, that took a month before I really became entrenched in my own lexicon. But the thing is, take this into consideration. This was the same day the event happened. The exact same day. Just hours after the corpses were zipped up. I go on YouTube, and before I even finish putting in my search query, Virginia shoot, up pops Virginia shooting, and then underneath it, Virginia shooting hoax. So here's what I've uncovered. In just hours, and in some cases minutes after this news broke, there were people online making videos and comments on the web saying that this event was just yet another false flag operation designed to whatever. We'll get more into the specifics on that later. So this is one of those things where you had people, and I saw so many videos that followed the exact same line of reasoning. There were people who had no absolute concern for property rights of others, basically just sitting there in front of their own TVs. This doesn't happen during the day. It pretty much means they're not working. They're unemployed, and my mom and dad or the government's probably supporting them, ironically. So they're sitting there at home, you know, in their boxers and, you know, just watching all this stuff, and they break out their own cell phones and they record themselves watching it, pointing at the screen, going, "Look, his hand is white, therefore a false flag," or "She didn't explode in a bunch of blood and bones and guts like in Doom, therefore it's a false operation." So basically, you had that happening over and over again. These people, before they even really knew the name of the killer, were on the internet going out spewing their rancor about it being some government inside job. Now, when you look at things like 9/11 and Sandy Hook, I mean, you do have certain specifics you can call into question. There are at least things you can answer to say, I don't know, you know, who was actually in the building on that day. Well, you can answer that question. I mean, you got to do some research, you know, who were the responders, what do they say in the report. There are questions that you can at least ask. I mean, they're really dumb, stupid questions, but they can be asked. With this Virginia shooting, there's nothing to talk about. It's a dude who was just very, very upset, who wanted recognition, who was a failure, who just really couldn't achieve anything in life, who was bitter about it, who decided to just go out in a ball of glory knowing that all the national news media would talk about him incessantly. So he goes out there and he kills people. There's nothing else to it. There's nothing. This is a guy acting independently of his own free will and accord. But you see, the conspiracy theorists out there, and you know, gotta stipulate this. Not all conspiracy theorists are like this, but enough of them are to give me concern. They think that everything that happens, absolutely every murder or natural disaster or shooting or anything negative that goes down is a government act. They are so filled with absolute unyielding hatred and abhorrence for the federal government and state officials that they think they are responsible for absolutely every bad thing that happens. So that when something like this, where it's obviously an independent act by a guy who had a lot of anger issue problems, even in something like this, they just can't come out and say, well, it's the dude, you know, who snapped. It's a guy who went out there and was filled with anger and hatred and wanted to have his 5 minutes of fame, so went out and killed people. They can't do that. They can't accept that. It has to be like a Manchurian candidate. It has to be someone pointing like a DARPA ray at them and make them go out and do it. Everything is the response of the government because they're trying to deprive us of our freedoms and take away our guns and round us up into, you know, FEMA depopulation camps. So this narrative goes on and on. And looking at that, there's a lot of similarities between some of these conspiracy folks and the guy who actually went out and perpetrated the murders. Because you see, much like the guy who went out there and killed people, I'm not going to say his name because he doesn't deserve mentioning. You know, these are people who are deeply invested in their aggrievements. There are people who feel bitter. There's a lot of resentment. I mean, I'm sure there's some guys who are conspiracy theorists who've actually went to college and make good money and maybe even have a family. But I think the large contingency of them are people who just feel bitter that they have not really done that much in life. They're looking for a scapegoat. They're looking for something to blame for their own failures and inadequacy. So they go after, you know, the New World Order or the big bad government trying to enslave everybody. That's a good default because it gives you something to, you know, always pin your problems on. So it's never your own fault. And this guy who went on the murderous rampage, he was what we call an injustice collector in the forensics investigator terminology. He's a guy who blames absolutely everybody's first problems except for his own self. And I think a lot of conspiracy theorists are like that because they can't accept that maybe the reason why people don't want to talk to them or hang out with them is not because of some NWO plot. It's due to the fact that they have no social skills. They never develop them. They spend all their time on the internet. Or that maybe they just smell bad because a lot of these guys don't like to shower, to be frank. But you see this, and they're always using the federal government. Blaming the police. They're Nazis. They're blaming everybody except the people that are actually controlling their own lives themselves. And I always kind of find it ironic, these people that are always saying the government's trying to take away their freedom really don't know what to do with their own freedom. They have so much power in their own lives, they can't actually do anything. I think they just feel very impotent. And these conspiracy theories, these old anti-government, anti-federalist, anti-globalization fantasies that develop in their heads, kind of help them feel better about the fact that they're just a bunch of losers. Sorry, but that's the case more times than not. And like I was saying earlier, you know, you look at these conspiracy folks, not all of them, but quite a few of them, they have so many similarities with the guy who actually went out and killed people. They're social isolated people. They live pretty much on their own. They are invested in this raw paranoia. They're invested in this complete hatred and despising of people who they don't even know. And they think there's a wide, you know, conspiracy against them personally that's keeping them from succeeding in life. And you see this across the board with all the mass shooters. They all have the exact same personality. They all think the world owes them something. They all think they've been deeply, aggrieved. There's been some injustice perpetrated upon them, which rationalized them going out and killing a bunch of people. And you see this online with the conspiracy theorists. Just go type in Illuminati, and you're going to see all these videos of people in Guy Fawkes masks with guns saying they're going to shoot federal officials. They try to take away their weapons. Or if they're spying on their data, they deserve to be shot and killed. You're seeing this incredible just deference of responsibility going on across the internet. And to me, that's absolutely terrifying. And as far as things to debunk, I mean, what is there to debunk? It's just that. The video is what it is. You actually have videographic evidence, and you can't accept it. Like, you have guys sitting there on the TV looking at it going, look, the guy's hand's white, as if it's absolutely impossible for light-skinned black people to exist. And that's their rationale for it being a false flag. Or even better, what I was saying earlier about the woman being shot, that she didn't explode like they do in, Quentin Tarantino movies. They don't even know how gun physics work, these people. that when you get shot from far away with a small capacity handgun like that, you're not going to have blood and bone flying everywhere. In fact, you're going to get shot a couple of times. As someone who's actually, talked and interviewed and in some cases worked alongside actual forensic pathologists for my line of work as a reporter and writer, I can tell you, sometimes people, they get shot a lot of times and don't die. I mean, even if you've ever gone hunting, back in middle school, I was hanging around with a bunch of good old boys. First time I saw a deer got shot, the dude who I was with had to shoot it like 4 or 5 times before it died. It was like hopping around and running around in circles. I mean, that's just the way physics are. And these people, they can't accept that. They can't accept physics. And they will do absolutely anything to further their own agenda and their own narrative of the government being evil and trying to enslave us and taking away, our power and our responsibility. When the fact of the matter is, these people themselves can't accept their own power and responsibility as individual people. Now, I know you had the guy, the woman who was killed. Her dad went on news later that night. And here's my thing. This dude lost his daughter. I mean, he can come out there and say whatever he wants. I mean, he's going through a grieving process. And he said he wants it to be more gun control. So what? There are people saying, oh, well, that's what this is then. Another call to have Obama take away our guns. What? This is a guy who lost his daughter. I mean, there are people who, lose their daughters in drunk driving accidents all the time, and they become members of MAD, and, that day they decide to become advocates and fight against these things, these social problems. Are all the members of MAD members of the Illuminati? I mean, so what? Who are you to tell another person who lost their child how to grieve? If he wants to be against gun control, well, go for it. I say he's earned that right. I believe that's completely reasonable. If we were to come out and say the exact opposite, that they should have concealed weapons everywhere, you know what? He's grieving, he lost his daughter, that's his right. I say go for it. I wouldn't hold anything against him. But these conspiracy folk people, they are absolutely obsessed, utterly infatuated with this narrative of their guns being taken away from them because they represent some totem that they can only have freedom if they have firearms. They have this absolutely bizarre fetishization of weapons that as long as they have that, then, they have freedom. They take away that, suddenly there's impotent people that'll be run over by the government, as if people, can actually live their lives without guns and actually have the same freedom they have. They can actually live, unfettered by, federal officials without owning an AR-15, that those people just don't exist. So anyway, you get caught up in this narrative again when they're saying, oh, it's another false flag for more gun control, just like Sandy Hook. Except when you go back and look at Sandy Hook, the exact opposite of everything the conspiracy theorists said happened. They said it was a false flag to take away everybody's guns or create more gun control laws. But what actually happened in the wake of Sandy Hook? No federal laws were passed, and actually more states made less restrictive concealed weapon laws after Sandy Hook. So actually, from a scientific standpoint, their entire rationale for Sandy Hook was completely erroneous. They said X would result in Y, X resulted in Z. It didn't happen. They said Sandy Hook was a false flag incident designed to create more restrictive gun laws, when actually, after Sandy Hook, the gun laws in America across the board became less restrictive. So the exact opposite of what they said happened. I mean, if anything, the conspiracy should be that Sandy Hook was a false flag to make less restrictive gun control laws, to get more guns out there. But, of course, you won't hear anybody out there going after that argument now, will you? So you just look at this, and I think it's just another sign that we have a very, very frightening sub-demographic in America. A lot of people who just cannot get out there and become adequate members of society, who are heavily invested in being isolated and believing in these social fantasies and thinking the world's against them and just putting all of their hatred and animosity towards, the banking system, just picking a random target the same way this shooter in Virginia did. And it terrifies me. And looking at all this, I'm going to say that from my perspective, this is the problem. The same problems we have with this serial killer, I think, are a lot of the same problems that this conspiracy theorist folks have. And that's the fact that, guns aren't responsible for mass shootings. I'll say it, they're not. Gun control laws, if you passed more restrictive gun control laws, you're not going to have, a considerable downturn in mass shootings. Why? Because, you already have the standard testing for gun laws, the Brady Bill, and having the waiting period. And the thing is, a lot of the people that end up going on mass shooters, They pass background checks. They've never been arrested, never been committed to a hospital. You can't prove they're insane. And in fact, not that crazy people do this, because the fact of the matter is crazy people can't plan out things like this. I mean, it's certainly a premeditated event. And the fact of the matter is, these gun control laws, they wouldn't catch. They wouldn't have stopped this guy from getting a gun. He would have gotten it anyway. Even if you ban the AR-15s like you did in the 90s, guess what? There's still so many of them out in the market. People can get their hands on them. You get them secondhand on the market. It's going to happen. You know, more gun control laws will not prevent these murders from happening. I'll give you that. But at the same time, the other argument that having more guns, more concealed weapon carry laws are less restrictive, that's not going to stop it either. And we saw that point blank with the video. That you had these people that were just gunned down. They could have had bazookas, and they could not have defended themselves. They were completely blindsided. They were ambushed. They were hit from behind. Guns would have done absolutely nothing to prevent this tragedy from happening. So I think both sides are wrong. And I will admit that neither side can really claim a victory here. It's not a mental health issue either, because, like I said earlier, it's premeditated. These are people who become deeply invested in their homicide fantasies, who make a conscious decision to go out there and kill people because they believe it rights some sort of injustice happened against them. They're not crazy. Crazy people pee on themselves and slobber and think the toaster's trying to, attack them when they put in Pop-Tarts. Crazy people, they don't do these kind of things. In fact, crazy people are actually more likely to be the victims of violent crime than actually being people who embark upon it. So then it goes out the window as well. The thing that causes mass shootings to happen, it's a matter of perspective. It's people who never really learn how to cope with failure. It's people who go out there who think the world owes them something. It's people who are deeply egotistical and narcissistic, who want to blame everyone except themselves for their own actions. In short, it's a lot of people out there who have the exact same mentality these conspiracy theorist folks have. And you look at this. There is an algorithm for how mass shooters are made. People get offended, they become socially withdrawn, they become infatuated with other mass killers, they start ideating about a homicide, they put together a plan, and they act upon it. There's at least half a dozen layers, half a dozen intervention points where we as ordinary citizens can stop in and say, hey, you're acting kind of weird, you look kind of irked, you're not really the person we used to know, you look like you're kind of out there, I just want to talk to you, see what's going on. But we as a culture, we don't do that. Instead, we take these mass shooting incidents, instead of looking at them as failures on our own part as individuals to help out people who need it, we just pin it on our political rival. We say, oh, it's the gun control crowd, Obama trying to take our guns, NWO. It's the NRA doing it on the other side, trying to create mass killings. You know what? The only person you can blame for this mass shooting is the guy who perpetrated it. His parents must have did a horrible job of raising him and telling him right from wrong. Who knows what happened to him in high school and college, but there is a personality. He made the conscious choice. It's a decision on his own, and that's who I blame for all this. And, I think there's a lot of people out there, especially in the conspiracy theorist demographic, who have pretty much the same personality, and it frightens me. Because I know these people are just one major failure away in their own personal life. They're one Facebook request rejection away from going out and doing the same thing this guy did. Now, all that to say, I want to make a video later on about intervention points for how mass shootings can actually be stopped, because I think it's one thing to sit here and complain about it and not actually take action and say, hey, guess what? I think there's things we can all do as just individual citizens to perhaps stop this from happening, so that's coming up later. So I'm doing that myself. But as to how this thing unfurled, folks, this is the tip of the iceberg. I'm going to say what everybody else is too afraid to say. This is a cornerstone moment in the mass shooting phenomenon. We're going to see more of this stuff happen. It's only a matter of time before some deeply disturbed, envious person just filled with bitterness and rejection, who thinks the world owes him something, who can't accept his own failures, decides to take it out on everybody, and he goes out and he gets a gun and he puts a GoPro on his head and he just basically broadcasts a mass shooting on Periscope. It's going to happen. It's going to happen a whole lot sooner than later, most likely, and unfortunately. Now, the thing is, for us as individual citizens, we can't ask the government to regulate this. Gun laws, for or against, are not going to stop mass shootings. mental health laws or against, or they're not going to stop these mass shootings. It's up to us to go out there, and when we see things, intervene. You know, if someone at school is acting completely socially withdrawn and acting weird, instead of ostracizing, go up to them and say, hey, what's going on? You know, I just want to see what's going on. You know, I don't want to think you're thinking about suicide or hurting anybody. That's where we're supposed to come in just as human beings, just as neighbors, as schoolmates, as people who care about one another. That's what we need to do. In these mass shootings, like I said, there are so many intervention points where these things can be stopped if only we followed our instinct and actually decided to do these things early on, back when they're even, you know, thinking that people owe them something, before they become invested in hatred. That we can stop this, and that's the only way we're going to get these mass shootings in a downturn in the United States. So anyway, all that to say, for all you mass shooter fans, all you people that are conspiracy theorists think this is just yet another gun control ploy, thank you. Thank you for living in your fantasy world and proving absolutely every point I've had about the mass shooter personality. We've got to work on this, and I myself will start taking action. I'm going on a public information campaign. I'll be seeing you shortly. If you agree, share, and if you don't, I don't care.